Hey everyone. All right, let's get started in summary lecture 4. We're going to be talking about how to select a behavior objective. And just a fun reminder, remember social marketing is all about behavior change. So this is obviously really important. We wanted to pick the audience ahead of time because we need to think about a behavior that's reasonable for them, but this is the goal here. In social marketing, behavior change is our product. In commercial marketing, they're trying to sell toothpaste or soap or, whatever. This is what we're trying to sell here. So it's super important. We've already done quite a bit, right? So you do know who your audience is. We're going to now try to set not just a behavioral objective, although that's our main thing. We're also going to then try to figure out, okay, what do people need to know or believe in order for us to get them to try to do this? So this is where we're already going to start thinking a little bit about the persuasion aspect of what we're doing here. Um, this right here down here, I just want to point this out. This is in your textbook, of course. It's one of those like little light blue boxes. And but th this is sort of the overall sort of goal of what we're trying to do today. So here's an example of where they're like the campaign purpose was to reduce traffic injuries and deaths. And they had decided that they wanted to do this by focusing on the problem of texting and driving. Great. Um, the behavior objective, because think about it, there's lots of things you could ask people to do to solve the texting and driving issues, right? You could ask them to, use hands-free devices or turn off their phone or, I mean, there's just various different behaviors that are all connected, but they're all different types of behaviors. What they decided to do was ask people to wait until they arrive at their destination to text. That's not the one I would have chosen, but okay. And then they realize that like in order for people to even be willing to consider this, right, they're going to have to understand that the percentage of traffic crashes involving somebody um, somebody who was texting while driving was awful high. So they're like, we're probably going to need to give them that information. And they're also going to need to believe that texting while driving is an actual distraction, right? A lot of people think they can handle it. So those are all sort of interconnected, but the behavioral objective is what we're really going for here. As usual, your book gives lots of amazing examples. What I really just want to point out here without going through every little individual one is, you know, all of these things are like there's usually so many different behaviors that you can choose to accomplish the same sort of objective. And that's really where you need to start today. Just like with the audiences, I wanted you to like think like sort of like generally like, okay, who are all the segments within the people I'm thinking about that it would make sense to target things for? This could be even bigger. But go ahead, like just jump in there and really just try to brainstorm like is everything I could ask somebody to do. Some of it might seem really out of the box, but whatever, that's when we'll come back and we'll sort of rein it in. What are things that I could ask this audience to do that would help me solve my objective, right? One thing I also want to point out though, this is a common pitfall, and I think it's just because we see it everywhere. A lot of times when I get students examples of behavior objectives they might want to focus on, they're really not looking at behaviors. They'll say things like, well, I want to make people more aware that, texting and driving is a problem. Awareness is lovely. It is lovely. But think about it like this. I mean, really, what awareness is a knowledge objective, right? It's like people need to know there's a problem. But why do you want them to know it's a problem? The reason you want them to know it's a problem is because ultimately you're hoping they'll change, right? So skip that step. We need to go beyond awareness. I know breast cancer awareness, pink, it's fun, it's wonderful. And we are pretty aware that breast cancer is a thing now, thanks to breast cancer awareness. But social marketers are more interested in like, okay, but now what can we ask people to do in order to reduce people's risk of dying from breast cancer or to prevent breast cancer from becoming an issue to begin with, whatever the case is, right? So just if you find yourself, if you have the word aware anywhere in the things that you're listing, just go a step further. Ask yourself, why do I want them to be aware? The other things I mentioned here is like they should be measurable. Like this should be something that we should be able to tell if people are doing, but don't get too stuck on that because there's lots of ways to measure things. And this isn't a research methods class, but if you could ask somebody if they have done the behavior, then it's measurable. So, but also this is more important to me. I want it to be singular. Only focus on one behavior at a time, and you will thank me later because it'll make your messaging much more simple. And it also is better for your audience, right? If you give them like way too many things to do, they're going to have a hard time sort of like focusing in on your communication. So that's a couple steps ahead. But th this is all just to say, for now, just try to pick one, although whatever, you're going to narrow it down. You can have a list for now. So, step one, yes, go ahead and develop a list of all the behaviors that you think your audience could do to achieve that purpose of your campaign. Um, this is actually not the best example, but I kind of like it because it still works. I mean, ideally, like it would be cool, just like with the audience, if you had like a little bit more commonality, as well as difference within it. But these are all really, really different behaviors. But I kind of like it because I want to show you that like you can still do this exercise with vastly different behaviors. If the whole point is we want middle-aged women who are obese to lose weight, we want to help them lose weight, be more healthy. I don't know. Again, that's not the best example, but look, here are three examples of things that could help them get towards that goal. Things they could do, behaviors. One is they could have 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity aerobic exercise, or maybe forget the exercise. Let's just have them focus on their diet. Let's say we want them to cut out, their caloric intake by 500 calories a day. Okay. Um, and then again, another really different strategy is like, let's just say we want them to have a conversation with a healthcare provider about it. Sorry, cuckoo clock, you know how that goes. So we want to, I'm always filming these on the hour. So in a healthcare provider, whatever, we can talk, it could be a nutritionist, it could be a doctor, whatever. We just are like, hey, the first step should just be communication because communication is a behavior, right? If somebody actively goes out and has a conversation that maybe they wouldn't have had otherwise, yeah, they're doing something. That's more than just awareness. So these are three vastly different behaviors. Let's say that we're like, well, which one is going to be the best for our audience? So just like we did with the priority audience selection, there's one more, but than priority. There were four criteria for that, but you're going to now evaluate all of the different behaviors you're considering based on these five criteria. Impact. This is about like, okay, if they do this, how much is it actually going to like help us achieve what we're trying to do with this campaign? Because some behaviors make a small dent, but some behaviors would be like, whoa, yeah, that's a huge dent. Willingness. Does your audience know about the behavior and are they actually, kind of like already on the path to doing it, or are they going to be completely resistant to it? Can you imagine them having any problems with you recommending this behavior to them? Measurability, I already kind of mentioned this, but I'll just sort of reiterate it. Yeah, the whole point is like, you don't want to ask your audience to do things that you're not going to be able to tell later if they did it or not. This is just so that you can assess your own campaign, which we're not really doing. Um, much in this class, but yeah, you want to be able to see if they're doing it in some way or not. And there's lots of ways to do that. And then this is where we get like kind of weird because we're talking about like market opportunity, but we're not really doing real marketing. We're doing social marketing. I mean, it is real marketing, but it's not commercial marketing. In this context, market opportunity means how many people how many people need us to reach them? How many people are not currently doing this behavior? Because, why would you have a campaign if most people are already sort of on board? Eventually, like, there'll be some sort of saturation in society or whatever. You actually do want an opportunity to help as many people as you can or to influence their behavior. And then market supply is more about like, are other people already doing this? If there's a ton of campaigns that are trying to already get people to donate blood or quit smoking or whatever the case is, then maybe they don't need you to come in and also start selling the same product. Okay. There's too much. Think about it as like it's good competition because it's like we want people doing it, but it's competition. You need some opportunity for you to be able to sell it. Okay, so again, I do not require my students to actually go through ranking, though you might find it helps you. So I'm going to walk through it anyway, but it's just like the priority audience thing. I'm not going to go through it, but it's basically like you can go through those five criteria and kind of assess how much this behavior, you know, like matches these criteria or isn't applicable at all, right? Um, and once again, like there are some times when you can see like there's a little bit of equalness, like market supply. Like I said, like, listen, there are a lot of like if I mean maybe it's not specifically 150 minutes a week, but we are bombarded with messages that tell us to engage in moderate exercise. Some of those come from campaigns, but some of them comes from the news media. They're everywhere. Same thing about market supply for talking to a healthcare provider. I know like that might seem weird, but think about any time you've ever seen like a prescription drug advertisement. They're always like, "Oh, go talk to your doctor." Now, maybe they're not talking about weight loss. That's true. But I'm going to take a stretch here, and I wrote this up in the example that's on your worksheet. I'm going to take a stretch here and say, though, that if so, remember, this audience is obese. If the target audience is obese and they do go talk to a healthcare provider, I think there's a good chance that weight-related conversation could come up. Maybe that's a stretch, but remember, I'm really not going to grade you on necessarily the realism of the things that you write. I'm more looking for logical consistency and the fact that you're trying to sort of critically think about this stuff. So don't get, you know, it's okay to let your imagination go wild like I let mine. But anyway, and then like another example, so like, I said that asking somebody who's like really overweight, thinking about how willing they would be to start like this regular routine of moderate intensity exercise. I'm going to say for it would probably be pretty difficult. Habits are really hard to change, and especially habits that affect that require time from us and dramatic shifts in our routine. So I would actually say that the willingness would be pretty low for my target audience here, but talking to a healthcare provider might be pretty easy, right? It's sort of like because they don't have to commit to nothing. Maybe the healthcare provider is even going to say like, "Oh, you should engage in 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise," but it's almost like because of the bar is a little bit lower with what the cost of the behavior is, they might be a little bit more willing. That said, despite that, how I scored these things, it did end up being that the recommendation for people to engage in 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise did have a higher score ultimately than talking to a healthcare provider. So, ta-da, I now have selected my target behavioral objective. Um, Again, all of this stuff that I'm saying, I left a little example on the worksheet or the assignment itself so that you can kind of like see how I would write that up. But all I'm really looking for is for you to engage in relative comparisons all of all the potential behaviors that you're considering. So remember, don't just talk about one behavior, talk about all of the behaviors you're thinking about and how they sort of compare. Okay. Um, this you can tell I just forgot I even had this. If you want to get really, because here's the thing, like I don't know how many behaviors you have. If you really get wild and you want to like compare a whole bunch of behaviors, a really easy way to do that is to just make yourself a little table like that, and then you can just go, you know, rank it all and then come up with your averages. I'm still going to ask if you want to present this, that would be awesome. But if you don't want to do a ranking, that's fine. I do want you to write it out though. I want you to like use your words to tell me about how all this stuff weighs and compares with each other because that's what you're going to put in that little final proposal at the end of the semester. So, um, and then I ask you about knowledge objectives and belief objectives. We mentioned these at the beginning of the slides. So this is more about, again, this is where the awareness component could come in. Now that you know what your target behavior is, like think about your audience and be like, okay, I want them to do this. I want them to engage in exercise, but what are they going to need to know in order for me to get them there? Right. And this is really going to depend on the behavior because, like, in the case of this example right now, most people understand that like exercise is associated with weight loss. So you probably don't have to talk to them about that. But what they might need to know in order to motivate them is how just little bits of exercise can go a long way to changing somebody's metabolism and initiating weight loss. I don't know. I'm just saying it's really going to vary in terms of like what the issue is and how much knowledge people already have. But these are all examples of different things that you might want to like throw in there depending on what your behavior is. And belief objectives are, it's more attitudinal. It's more about like, okay, regardless of what they know, what are they going to need to feel in order to get them in there? Whenever I think about belief objectives, efficacy, the idea that like people need to believe that they have the ability to do it, that's always an important one for me because people might know, like, yes, if I quit smoking, it's going to be good for my health, but they might not believe that they have the ability to do it. So one of the things that I'm, always thinking about in terms of persuasion is like, okay, what information can I give them to motivate them or get over those, I would say like belief humps that they have that don't want them to do it. But there's a lot of it, like a lot of different types of beliefs that you would might consider influencing. So just give that some thought. In the worksheet, I ask you to not just come up with those, but also explain like why, like why are these things important, or because what you're going to want to do is eventually when we start working on marketing is think about how you can address these things in your in your actual message. But here, just, another great example from your book. This is what it looks like when you have all this stuff. You've got a purpose. I want to reduce senior falls. I've got my audience now. And then the objective is have them exercise 5 times a week. The knowledge objective is they need to understand their risk, right? They need to, 1 in 3 adults age 65 and older falls each year. Like, ooh, yeah, and you're already 75. So, and then a belief objective of the risk of falling can be reduced by strengthening muscles and improving balance. Actually, that's kind of weird to me. That seems like a knowledge objective too, but I do understand. Again, I think it's about like, hey, you can solve this problem. I think it gets back to the efficacy. Um, you can do this and it is good. Believe it. So yeah. But anyway, so that's what you're supposed to come out with by the end of this week. And look at how far you've come, right? I mean, we now are like real full force into social marketing right now because you will have a behavior that you are trying to market. So this is great. Okay. Look forward to seeing those worksheets. Bye.